welcome to Midlife Adventures. Hello, Midlife Adventurers. Welcome to Newport Beach. Taking a little break from some of the heat of Corona. Down here at the beach, it's about 23 degrees cooler along the coast than it is inland. So I wanted to share with you a little bit about travel being starting to pick up a bit. And there might be some of you that are thinking about maybe taking an international trip. And I wanted to give you a little bit of insight into some of the things that you're going to need or will be required. And even if you've taken an international trip in the past, you may find some of this a repeat, but you also may find some things that are new because there's been a lot that's changed. And so I wanted to share some of those things, some of the documentation that you're going to need, some things that you might expect, some possibly hidden fees that are out there that you probably didn't think about. So come along with me. Let me help you make that international adventure happen. And let's enjoy the beach while we do it. So the first thing that I want to talk to you about is if you're going to make an international trip, you can't do anything unless you have a passport. Yes, the passport is required. And for all countries now, there's no more, for U.S. citizens going to Mexico and Canada, birth certificate, voter registration card, that sort of thing. You need a passport. Now, there are a couple of other options that are available if you're just going to plan on going to Canada and Mexico and not traveling anywhere else in the world. But do yourself a favor, get a passport. It'll make things much, much easier. Now, if you're planning to do some sort of international travel that's going to require a passport, and you're not planning at least 4 months in advance, you're probably not going anywhere. Because right now, the turnaround time for getting your very first passport or renewing a passport that's expired is up to 18 weeks now. I just learned it's about 18 weeks, which is over 4 months. So they're really, really behind on this. So that's the first thing that you want to do is make sure that you either have a passport or that your passport is valid. And that does not need to be renewed. Now, a passport is generally valid for at least 10 years when it's issued. However, that's not really the case anymore because most countries now require that your passport be valid at least for 6 months prior to you actually leaving the country. So in other words, if your passport's within the last year of being renewed, you really should go ahead and get it renewed right now. Because if the renewal is less than 6 months, many countries will not allow you to actually travel unless you have a 6-month validity. And in some cases, some countries, depending upon where you're going, require at least 1 year of validity. So that's the big key for your passport if you're renewing your passport. Make sure you have at least 6 months validity if you're going to make any sort of international trip. And once you get to year 9, go ahead and renew it. Now, the passport does have fees. For a brand new passport, it's $145 to get a passport issued. That includes all fees. That does not include any fees that you might have involving any sort of services that are trying to expedite and get you a passport perhaps faster, or if you're using a service that is taking care of all the paperwork for you. That would be inclusive. The passport fee itself is $145. Your renewal fee is $110, meaning if you have already had a passport issued and you're just getting it renewed, then it's $110 minus any additional service fees and things that you are that you're going to be required to pay if you want to do it fast. Now, if you need to expedite a passport, there are ways that you can do it, that you can shave off some of that time, that 18 weeks or 12 weeks, whatever it might be. 12 weeks right now is currently the expedited time to get it done. But if you find yourself in a situation where you absolutely have to leave the country for something, usually they're only going to approve it if it's business related. But you can get it done if you're willing to go to a passport office, if there's one in your area, and they'll take care of that for you. But be prepared, you're going to pay a lot on fees. Heavy fees going to be for expedited passport services. So those are the key things about the passport. Almost 4 months now to process one, and expedited fees if you have to do it sooner, and make sure that you've got at least a good rule of thumb would be 1 year validity on your passport. And you do require a passport, pretty much go anywhere in the world. So let's talk visas. For those of you that are not quite sure what a visa is the official acknowledgement that a country is going to allow you to enter their domain or their country. Every country requires a visa. So the only real thing is, or the only thing that varies is what countries actually require for a visa and when they require that you actually obtain the visa. Most countries right now will issue you a visa when you arrive. And a visa is basically the little stamp that's in the passport. When you arrive, they stamp it. That's a visa. Whether or not they charge you for it, or they issue you a free visa, that's the big difference right there. The second thing is whether or not countries require you to obtain a visa prior to your arrival. And this happens a lot with so a lot of countries out there now are requiring this, where you actually have to obtain your visa prior to the departure from the U.S. And so if you do that, what you end up having to do is either go to that consulate if you happen to live near one, or more than likely you're going to hire a visa service. And that visa service is going to facilitate all that paperwork and services for you. They're going to send out your passport so that you can get your visa and get it stamped and send it back to you. You will pay for all those service fees, and the fees can be great depending upon the visa that you're going to require. Visa fees really vary to $0 all the way up to the most expensive visa that I paid for was a couple of years ago, my visa for Russia. The consular fees were over $200, and by the time I handled or paid for the visa services, because the only other way I could get the visa, handling it myself, was if I flew to Washington, D.C. and presented myself at the consular. And this is the Russian visa here. And so I hired a visa service fee to do that, and they charged me between FedExing documents and paperwork and a variety of other things. It was another $200. So my visa for Russia cost me over $400. Research that before you make a decision on where you're going. My Chinese visa a few years ago was, I believe, $130 or $150 using a visa service as well. So they vary. Many countries now with the COVID situation have actually gone and set up things where you can do an electronic visa online. Sometimes they're charging you for it, sometimes they're not. Be very careful who you use, because there's a lot of services out there that are not the consulate services. They will charge you much more fees to get you the visa when you can go online directly to the consular services and just pay the actual the visa fee and not the service fees that are being tacked on as well. The other thing that you want to make sure of with visa fees is that, again, you're using somebody that's authentic and they're authorized to issue those visa fees, because there's a lot of fraud depending upon where you're going to. But I found this in a lot of research that I had to do for Africa. And if you are traveling to multiple countries, make sure that you check whether or not any of the countries that you're going to require a visa, because it's very possible that you're traveling to one country that does not, but you may be crossing a border into another country that requires a U.S. citizen to have a visa. And so you definitely want to make sure that you're prepared for that and you have all the paperwork, because you don't want to be detained at any border at this point. So we got that all about visas, right? Good job. Let's talk COVID and COVID test requirements. This is something that's very, very fluid right now and changes on a regular basis. But I will share with you what I know currently right now and what some tips are to help you facilitate this. Almost every country out there right now requires some verification regarding COVID status, whether that's going to be a negative test that you need to produce within a short period of time prior to your arrival, or your vaccination status. And yes, they're not playing the honor system here where you can just stroll on in and say, yeah, I was vaccinated. You must provide proof for that. So don't make the mistake of thinking you can just tell them and they're going to be okay with that. They're going to require proof. They're going to require official written proof of that. So now the countries that are requiring only, or that require a negative test, which is going to be a majority of them, there's a couple things you can do. When you're overseas, you can arrange to have a COVID test taken. And this is something that there's a couple different ways you can do it. I found that the easiest way to do it is to work with the hotel that you're staying at, because they have set up a process now whereby they actually bring in medical personnel to administer testing to you. You do got to pay for it like anywhere else. But there's a few varieties out there that you can actually do. Make sure you schedule the test close enough to your departure, because you are going to require, at the moment, the United States requires a negative COVID test upon arrival back into the U.S., including U.S. citizens and including if you are vaccinated or not. They require the negative test right now. Some countries do not require that negative test, but you've got to do your research on this. I've also learned that some of the airlines are now offering, and I've seen them in some of the drugstores and things, you can buy take-home test or take-it-home test for negative. You do need to set up some sort of an internet appointment. I haven't thoroughly vetted these out to see whether these are legitimate or not. I still think your best bet is probably going to be to have some sort of medical personnel and work with, the local establishment there. On my recent trip to Africa, I had to take 3 COVID tests. I had to take a test prior to leaving so that I could arrive in Kenya. I had to take a test in Kenya so that I could go on to South Africa. And then I had to take a test in South Africa so that I could get back to the U.S. So this is now a part of the process that you really have to allocate and plan for. And you will need to plan so that it works within your sightseeing and all the other touristy things and travel-related things that you've got done. This has now become kind of a priority, at least for the foreseeable future. That's going to be the very best advice I can give you on COVID tests. There's a site that I'll give you. There's a link into the description in this video. It's called Sherpa.com. And this site will actually allow you to plug in your departure point and your destination, and it will provide all the information currently that you need relating to COVID, as well as other documentation about passports, visas. It's really, really a good site, free to use. I would check that periodically right up until the time that you're ready to depart, to see if any of the requirements, and yes, they can happen right before. The requirements changed for a trip to Egypt last year. 2 weeks before I was scheduled to go, they went from a 72-hour advance to a 48-hour advance test. So I had to reschedule my test before I left the U.S. with only 2 weeks to spare. So it's very, very good to maintain and stay on top of that. So those are the things that I wanted to talk to you about international travel. If you are planning something, the best thing you can do is prepare well in advance, and even more so now because of the passport situation. Plan well in advance. So I want to thank you for staying with me on this. Remember, subscribe to the channel. Let me know what you think, and hopefully you'll be on the adventures for yourself, and hopefully some of these tips will pay off for you. So until then, there is more to come, and enjoy beautiful Newport Beach.
Well, East Coast girls